Hey everyone, and welcome back to another King Arthur Legends Rise video. First of all, I just want to say I really appreciate all the support that I've been getting on my videos recently. I don't know what's going on, but for some reason people have really been watching and subscribing, so I appreciate all that. Thank you. I'm glad. Hopefully you guys are liking it. I haven't seen a whole lot of nasty comments or anything, so that's good. But yeah, just wanted to shout that out real quick. Today's video, we're going to be talking about the best heroes for the favor dungeons. Now, the favor dungeons are actually really important because they are the thing that awakens your heroes here. Now, your heroes, even though they can get some stats and things like that, the most important thing to unlock is this additional section of equipment down here, which can be really important to some of your characters. So I do want to mention that, like if you awaken them to 3 stars, they'll get that orb, and 6 stars, they'll get, I think it's a banner. And if you awaken them 1 time, 1 star, you'll end up getting that belt slot. So yeah, and where you do this is in the favor dungeons. Now these rotate, and one of them is open per day, unless it's Sunday, and at the recording of this video, it's Sunday. So everything is open, which is why I kind of wanted to go in and just show everyone, you know, the type of heroes that you should be looking out for when you're building your teams. Now, when you're building your teams, you want to keep in mind that you're trying to get to stage 7 or stage, I guess even 4 is okay, but stage 5 is pretty nice as well, because you'll be able to farm the rare statues for your specific favor. Stage 6 tends to be a little more difficult. That's kind of like the roadblock because these bosses here are kind of hard. However, if you're able to get past them, stage 7 usually tends to be a bit easier. So yeah. Let's jump in to Stag first. Now, Stag is actually pretty nice because 2 of the heroes I've mentioned in multiple videos before. I've talked about how these characters are really good in all different areas of the game. So they're going to be leveled up most likely already for your account progression. And those 2 are Tristan and Kay. Now, the way I'm going to structure this is I'm going to be talking about the damage dealers that you want to be looking out for, the support heroes that are really good for your team, and then the healers. I think you need about 1 healer. Now, there are a couple of these dungeons that don't really have like amazing healers. So unless you have specific heroes, it's going to be a little tougher. But each kind of favor faction, we'll call them a faction, has at least 1 healer. So that's nice. They might not be super efficient or very good, but they're going to have them. So yeah, we have damage dealers, support heroes, and healers. So for Stag, your damage dealers are Tristan, like I said, Kay, and then you also have this fairy kind of girl down here, Arduin. She actually pumps out some really good damage. If you were to go into her actual character screen, her relics here, her attack damage is pretty high, and she also has a passive ability that allows her to do additional, like to attack an additional person for another 80 damage. So this is actually pretty strong. It attacks 3 times, and if you include the passive, it turns into a 4th. So the damage is 98, almost 100. You can also, skill this up or increase the relic skill to do a lot of damage per hit, on top of having her passive do that additional 80% hit. So she's a secretly good damage dealer. And on top of that, she has some other really cool things as well, like heals that you really wouldn't expect her to have, but she kind of does it all. So she heals all of her out, all of the allies. She also removes debuffs from your allies, but she does have the chance to polymorph them, but it is pretty small. And that's where you just can't move for a turn. I guess in this case 2 turns, and you take more damage, but the likelihood of that happening is pretty rare, and if it does, just back out and retry until you don't have that happen. So yeah, she's one of your damage dealers. If you don't have her built up, I really don't think it's a huge deal, but don't sleep on this hero. Tristan and Kay, as you see, I mean, I've already got up to Stag's favor 7, and I've cleared it with Kay and Tristan being my damage dealers, so this gets the job done. All right. Now, supports, if you have pulled Ain is very, very strong in this type of game content. She just does a bunch of different things. Abnormal status immunity, I also think, is a pretty big deal. The fact that you can't get stunned or slept, it also prevents you from getting polymorphed with, Arduin here that we just looked at. So that's a pretty strong first ability. She also has the ability to remove debuffs, damage over time effects, and she can buff your team with the attack increase. This is going to be, huge for people like Tristan and Kay, obviously. And then she also has the ability to give you defense increase and effect resistance increase along with DOT immunity. So she just gives you like every single buff, removes all of the bad things, and gives you abnormal status immunity. She also has a weird passive where when she uses her skill 3, she damages people, but I would not build her for damage. I don't think she's a great damage dealer. When you're using her skill 2, she grants counterattack, which is pretty nice, to all your allies, and critical strike damage. So, yeah, pretty cool. I don't know. I really like her. I had her, and I actually pulled one of her relics. Like, I had her built, but I just didn't use her enough, so I reset her to build another legendary that I needed at the moment. But, yeah, very, very strong support. Don't sleep on her. She's best used in somewhere like Arena, but she's also very strong in these favor dungeons. Another one that I want to mention from a support standpoint is this Calic person. They have an AoE that can completely eliminate one of the enemy's turns. So, I mean, if you're lucky enough, you can hit all 4. If you're stuck on a place, you can just play the RNG game and try and, have this root binding prevent turns for you to kill with Kay or Tristan. So that's an option. Also, he has a weak heal, but if they do have, like if the opposing team has some kind of stuns or sleeps, you can actually trigger this overhealing, which gives even more healing, which might be somewhat impressive. And then he also has a heal on his A1. So yeah, he's actually not too bad. He's an okay support. I don't think he's worth building, but if you're lacking, like if you need a 3rd or 4th option, let's say you don't have like an Isolde or something like that, then he's probably needed because Isolde is really the only healer in this faction. And you're going to be using her for her second ability, where she's going to grant a heal and recovery over time to your team. So, yeah, I think most people know about Isolde, but that is the Stag faction. So you have your damage dealers, which is Tristan, Kay, and then your support heroes. Arduin as well for your damage dealers. And then you have Ain, Calic, and then Isolde as the healer. These 2 are your supports. So those are the ones that I would focus on. Moving on to Crow's Favor. Now, Crow's Favor is going to be one of those faction dungeons where it's either extremely easy because you have crazy good heroes like Bedivere and Jillian, like me, or it can be pretty light if you don't have either of these 2 heroes. Because the healer, which is Jillian, if you don't have her, it's pretty slim pickings. The damage dealer, I think Rosier is is plenty strong to be your main damage dealer. I don't think that's too much of an issue. I think you can get pretty far with her. However, they do have Ralph. Ralph is another good damage dealer in here. He has great buffs for your team as well. Like if somebody dies on your team, he grants a bunch of different buffs to himself, and then also some really good buffs like this 2 battle that grants people attack increase 3 and hit accuracy 3. And then also, like, they deal damage based on max HP and stuff too. It's crazy. Damage dealt increase. Really, really strong triggers. He also has this really cool passive called Friendless and Alone, where it has a 40% chance to trigger, but there has to be no allies alive. So it can charge his attack gauge by 100, trigger Shadow of Dawn. He has this HP recovery. So there's an interesting kind of, I guess, way to try and progress in this dungeon. And that is to have Ralph and then a bunch of like level 1s. Because then once all of them die, Ralph then has that ability to trigger this. And the available uses are 40 times. So he can charge his attack gauge by 100%, attack all enemies 3 times with the total damage of a pretty good multiplier while healing himself. So it's an interesting concept. I don't know if I would recommend it. But again, if you don't have Bedivere or Jillian, this dungeon is going to be pretty hard. So back to the list. So Rosier and Ralph as your 2 damage dealers. If you don't have Bedivere, if you have Bedivere, this whole thing is a joke. So those 2 are very good. Rosier, I've had multiple videos on her already as well. Great DOT, damage dealer. She has Drain, all of these crazy bleeds. But she also has some pretty good AoE damage, which is why I think she's probably top of the list if you don't have Bedivere for damage dealers. Now, healing. This is tough. So Jillian is she's an amazing healer. She has great heals on her first ability and second ability, but then on top of that, she has like attack gauge down on enemies. She charges your healer's attack gauge, and she also heals whenever someone gets abnormal status. She's just an amazing hero, but she's a legendary. So if you don't have her, the only other option is Baby Shark here, Baby Baborn. He does really weird things. Like he puts negative effects called Mark on your team, which lowers their defense and their evasion. However, he has this really big heal. On his third skill, where he has a chance to basically control all the enemies with Brainwatch, which is a really good debuff, but it's 10%, so do not bank on this. So he grants all allies defense increase 1 on his third attack, and then he triggers this over healing, which, depending on how many marks are on your target, it'll heal them according to the number of marks, and then he removes all of those marks. It's just a really hard thing to play. His passive also ties into marks and things like that, so he's going to be tough. But sadly, he's literally your only option if you don't have Jillian. Now, I think you can basically raw force this thing with like Ralph and Jillian, and then some 1-stars. You have your 1-stars die. Ralph grants your Rosier a bunch of damage along with Ralph, and you just go in there and you slaughter, and you don't even need a healer. That probably could get you up to like stage 5. That might work. But yeah, I don't know if I would recommend building this healer if you don't have Jillian. I would probably just get as far as you can and hope to pull, the Bedivere or the Jillian in the future. And if luck just isn't going your way and you've been playing the game for 2 or 3 months or whatever, and, a banner hasn't come up for Jillian, then yeah, I guess you got to build the shark guy. But that's the bad news there. Now, Nicholas is basically your only support hero. Like I said, this faction is going to be hit or miss. If you have those two, easy. If not, you are slim pickings. So Nicholas, he does all of your kind of control abilities. So he can taunt someone. He can also, he's got taunt on the first attack and the third attack. And then he also has taunt, anytime he's in his stealth mode, he has the ability to taunt someone as well. So 3 different ways to taunt. It turns into a really good control unit, kind of protect, your weaker heroes if you're going the route of having, 1 or 2 damage dealers along with a support and a healer. He might be able to save your old baby shark here. But that's really it. It's very slim pickings on the support side as well as the healer side. So you got Nicholas, who I don't think is very good. Like, I don't think he's worth building. But sadly, he's your only option for a support hero to go along with Rosier and Ralph if you don't have these other 2 overpowered heroes. So that's basically all there is for the Crow Dungeon. Okay, so next is Hound's Favor, and this one I am certainly lacking. But, so your damage dealers in this area, Urians, I have really high hopes for this guy. I actually think that he's going to be very, very strong. I'm planning on using him in Plain of Beasts. Not Plain of Beasts, sorry. Frozen Plains for Aldry the bear. Especially if I get his Storm Relic, because he's got decreased defense, on his abilities, which a lot of people don't have in this game. But he's going to be your main damage dealer, I think. He has the decrease defense, and then he also has a dual multiplier. So it's based on his attack and his HP. So I think it's going to be interesting to understand which one scales better in this game. Because sometimes in games you'll have people that have HP multiplier heroes, and their damage is insane, and then others, it's so skewed towards the first multiplier, which in his instance is attack, that I don't know the best way to build him yet. All I know is he does do really good damage, specifically on this second ability. His multipliers are very good, 159% attack and 7% of his HP. It also inflicts decreased defense 2, which is really good. And then if the target's below 50%, he does additional damage, which is also a very high multiplier. Skills like this, where you're attacking one enemy, they're going to be very good on these boss levels. So on 3, 6, and 10, they have these kind of like Ice Titan bosses. Well, I guess they change their element, but these Titan bosses, and they are pretty difficult. That's why I'm actually stuck. They do a lot of damage, and they put up shields and things like that. So if you have your Ryans, there's a high possibility that this additional damage, if you're attacking that guy, if he's like at 30%, it might just be enough to tick him all the way down. So, yeah, like I said, Urians, however you pronounce it, I think he's going to be your main damage dealer. He gives your entire team counterattack. It is 50% chance, but it's pretty cool. He himself will gain the counterattack and then charge his attack gauge. He also heals himself. I do want to mention on this attack too, though, the sacrificing actually isn't a bad thing because he does have his second passive where if his HP is below 40%, he gains this physical enhancement and increases the counterattack state for an additional turn. So this physical enhancement, it does a certain value number of damage. Like, it's not scaled or based on anything. I'm assuming this is good. I haven't tested this yet, but I also don't know if this is like an additional hit. I think it is. I think this is additional damage on top of whatever skill you're using. So if, let's say, you have this physical enhancement and then you counterattack, I'm assuming you get this damage multiplier plus this, but I don't know. Either way, his damage here is already good, but I just wanted to talk about the interaction between that. He also has the ability to get defense increase 2 when he's hit, which is pretty strong. especially if you have his Chivalry 8, which increases his HP anytime he's hit on this passive. So it's a very strong Chivalry. But yeah, he's going to be your main damage dealer. Guinevere can be a very good damage dealer as well because she's got some crazy multipliers on her third skill here. You do have to charge it up for a turn, but the damage is very strong, especially against single target bosses like that Titan that I showed you. But then she also has like really good... she has a lot of other good skills with, good debuffs and then shielding your team. So it's kind of hard to justify to build her as a damage dealer just because other areas of the game, you're not going to want her in damage. You're going to want her more of a support. But if you're struggling in this faction, you can certainly use her as your damage dealer. And then I also have this character here, Aaron. I don't think he's great or anything. However, he does have the ability to counterattack. And then he has a dual multiplier with attack and defense. He gains himself a shield. He also has an AoE. So I think he can be an okay damage dealer. But I truly believe that this faction is going to be a slow grind. It's just going to be, these heroes with a lot of defense, a lot of HP, kind of just chipping away at damage. So I don't necessarily think that he's going to be your best pick. I think it's Urian's. Now for support, I already mentioned Guinevere, fantastic support hero. If you have her, good on you. Other support, Bodwin. I think Bodwin's pretty good support. He has the ability to put attack decrease down 2, which is strong, especially for those boss areas. He does have share damage and defense increase 2. Now, the share damage, this is a pretty good quote-unquote buff. I don't necessarily know that it's a buff, but they treat it as one. If you have a hero in your team that's like level 1 and you have a Bodwin, that share damage really scales bad for your team, so don't do that. However, if you have a bunch of level 50s and some 60s, this is an okay buff. This is kind of his bread and butter. If somebody gets hit with abnormal status, which is the stun, silence, all of those things that kind of waste your turn, he can remove it and then also grant everybody a defense increase 3, which is very strong. And then at the start of the battle, he grants someone a shield and, that abnormal status immunity. So very good support hero, for sure. Gareth is the other one. Gareth is kind of like your control hero here. Stuns on the first attack, freeze on the second, and then bind on the third. So all of the different abnormal status abilities all on one hero. Pretty cool passives here and there, but yeah, this is a hero that if you don't have Guinevere, you're trying to keep your healer alive. This is someone that you send in there to try and control the damage dealer for that specific stage that you're on. So Gareth, this is really the only place Gareth is going to shine. I think they're completely useless in every other area other than maybe Arena, but Arena is really not worth building heroes for. And then I have Alan. I have Alan in here because Alan is one of the few heroes that can reduce attack gauge in this dungeon. So, yeah, attack gauge and then attack speed decrease. These are two really good debuffs. So, Alan, I think, has, a decent spot in your team. Also, the attack speed decrease whenever he starts the battle. It says on a random enemy, but if you go into the boss stage, this could also inflict, and then his skill 3 is completely useless. But Alan's okay there. The only healer is Turin. However, Turin is amazing. I've had multiple videos on Turin. Being able to change it to night and rain, if you have an additional copy of her on her chivalry, turns her into a great healer, great support hero, a lot of really great buffs. So yeah, do not sleep on Turin. Fantastic in this dungeon. All right, moving on. Serpents. Now, Serpent's favor, I think, is the easiest one because you start with Morgan. Morgan is amazing here. She can be your damage dealer, and even if you don't build her, as a damage dealer, she's going to be your damage dealer because she is just going to loop all of her abilities on this skill 2, where she's just going to decrease the target's attack gauge, which also is decreased even more on her passive ability whenever the cooldown comes back around. So yeah, she's just going to be AoEing everybody, reducing attack gauge. Meanwhile, you're going to try and keep her healed up with your team, and that's how you're basically going to progress in this faction. There are some other heroes that you can bring in. So other good damage dealers are Sigrun. Sigrun has a pretty strong third attack ability. It is charged, but her multipliers are very good, 98% attack and defense. And then she puts up Mark, which lowers the defense of the enemy by 5%. And then it also inflicts damage dealt decrease. She's a pretty strong hero. She's great in one of the equipment dungeons, obviously, but I think she's also a very strong hero in here as well. Sadly, she's a legendary. But for some reason, people tend to pull her the most. So it's likely that you maybe have her. So Sigrun is another one of those great damage dealers. Clarissa, another, a legendary hero, but she's similar to, she's like a fire Bedivere, except way worse. She has kind of this one random enemy on her passive ability like Bedivere does, ignores percentage of defense, all of those things. I don't think she's really worth building. But yeah, if you have her and you like her, you want to build her, she's an okay damage dealer. She's got good multipliers, defense decrease 2 on her third ability. She also gives herself critical strike increase 1, which I think is 20%. So she's kind of easy to build. I guess that's one of the benefits to her. She also decreases her passive skills. So I think in the future, she'll actually be a strong hero. But for now, where I'm at, like in the early to mid game, I'm really not focused on her. I'm just riding the Morgan train. And Sigrun, because I built her up for the equipment dungeon. But Clarissa is another one. And then my kind of sleeper pick here, I'm really high on this guy, this Maul uncommon. The whole reason I'm using him is because he has a defense decrease 2 for 2 turns on his second ability, which you can actually skill that up to 100%, which is really nice. And he has a pretty strong AoE ability that does 177% multiplier and also inflicts defense decrease 2 for 80%. So he's my other main damage dealer with Morgan. But yeah, I wouldn't sleep on this guy. I actually think he's pretty good. He also has the ability to give himself stealth, and he's squishy. So if he has stealth, a lot of times they're going to be targeting other heroes on your team, which is kind of nice. And then anytime he crits, he charges his attack gauge and gives himself attack increase 2. So yeah, I really like him. I think he's kind of a cool character. So for support heroes, you have Jack. Jack is a pretty decent support hero. So he grants shield to an ally. Now this may seem weak, but on his passive, whenever he uses his skill 2, he actually charges that character's attack gauge by 50%. So this is really strong. If you want to loop back around to Morgan to, keep decreasing, the attack gauge on some of your enemies, or if you want to utilize Maul's A3 or third skill again, you could use Jack. So Jack has that ability, which is nice. And then he also has an attack decrease 1, which is going to be good for those boss levels. So yeah, he also removes abnormal status from your allies and then grants them a shield if they're inflicted with it. So that's also a very strong ability. I think Jack goes a little bit under the radar. Now, Kenneth. I have Kenneth written here because, he has the ability to put defense decrease on people for 3 turns. He also has defense increase 2 on one of his abilities. He's an okay support hero. However, I think Maul's better for the defense decrease. I don't see him worth building, but I did want to mention him, I guess, at the very least. And then your healers for this. Sarah is just so amazing. If you have Sarah, guys, build her. Great heals on all of her abilities. And she also has the ability for buff disruption. So if the bosses are trying to buff themselves with shields or anything like that, she stops it right in their tracks. And the attack gauge disruption, because they do add attack gauge as well. Sarah's fantastic there. So just a great hero. I think a lot of people know how good Sarah is. She's great in every aspect of the game, and she's super important here. If you don't have Sarah and you have Frederick, because Frederick, I think, is given to you on the guaranteed 10 pop with Morgan, he also has some pretty good heals, on his second ability. So I wouldn't sleep on him. He's kind of like a support hero for the most part, but if you need to use him just as a healer, his multiplier on his heals isn't bad. So that is Serpent. 2 left. Steed's favor. So for Steed's, your main damage dealer, basically your only one, is going to be Cormac. Now the nice thing is Cormac is just amazing in general, and he's not just a damage dealer. So that's kind of neat. Yeah, guys, if you haven't figured out about Cormac, now, the thing is, people will rant and rave about his Frost Relic because this skill hits extremely hard, especially with waves. And if you have his Frost Relic and you want to level that up or use him here, he's certainly good. But if you just have the baseline, his skill 3 hits for 200% attack. Crazy good damage. His attack 2 does some pretty good AoE damage itself. The nice thing about him, though, is he grants himself defense increase, and whenever he's hit, when an ally's hit, he has the ability to remove his defense increases, but then he also heals all of your allies based on 18% of his defense. This is like, you have this damage dealer that scales on attack and defense. So he's a bit hard to build, but he has the ability to heal based on his defense. So you're kind of going to want to give him good attack, solid defense, benefit from the defense increase whenever he's attacking, and just mow down people. So he's your main damage dealer. Ban is the other one. Ban used to be amazing. Now he got kind of nerfed. However, he is good. I think he's just better on, boss levels because he has some pretty good single target abilities like here, reducing the target's attack gauge. And then he also gives himself attack speed increase, which plays into his second ability. So he's kind of like a single target damage dealer. He is good. However, I think Cormac is a bit better as a raw damage dealer, but I think Ban is still pretty solid. And then if you're lucky enough to have Merlin, you can certainly build Merlin as a damage dealer. He's very good. He's like Guinevere, where he's great as a support, but if you needed to, you could build him as a damage dealer because he does have some decent multipliers on his second ability, which is the one that you'll be using all the time. He puts up this Frozen Remains ability, which gives your team damage over time immunity, also damage taken decrease, and it charges their attack gauge. This is an amazing ability. His third ability is kind of like a control ability, but he does have a passive that also gives your team defense increase too. Hey, remember Cormac? Yep, healing, so that's pretty good. And then recovery over time. Now, if you don't have Merlin, then yeah, you're a bit out of luck, but you can build him as a damage dealer just because he does have pretty high multipliers on that second ability, which gives you the really good debuff. So yeah, support. Again, Merlin, if you want to build him support, you certainly can. All the things I just mentioned, really good debuffs, control with the freezes on his third ability and first ability, as well as having the defense increase and recovery over time. The only other support hero in here is kind of like Boars, in my opinion. He does counterattacks, and the counterattacks are can inflict taunt. He also has the taunt on his second ability as well. So he's kind of like Nicholas from the other faction. However, Boars does pair well with Ban. Ban has like this unique passive that whenever he attacks, he grants defense increase 1 to himself and boars for 4 turns, and then also fills their attack gauges. So that's kind of why I mentioned him being in here. The counterattacking for the taunt can help your team, kind of survive. And then he does put up the counterattack damage increase, but I don't know of anyone that gives your team counterattack in here. So this is kind of useless, but it's an okay multiplier, and it's an okay AoE if you're kind of trying to finish off a couple different people. But you're mainly using him for his counterattacking and his taunts, just to control enemies, to protect some of your squishier heroes like Ban. And then your only healer in here, which is why I think Cormac is kind of important, is this Amelia person, and it's just on this third ability. However, the multiplier on that third ability is pretty strong. So Amelia is your only option here, other than if you have like Cormac or Merlin. So yeah, this one's, I think, a little bit tougher as well. But that is Steeds. And then last but not least is Bull. So for Bull's favor, your damage dealer, if you're lucky enough to have him, is Gawain. Now, I've got high hopes for this guy, but I have not been impressed. I'm going to eventually level 60 him and see what he can do, like in Frozen Plains with Aldrey, because he does have the defense decrease 1 on his first ability, and I wanted to use him with Urians as well for the counterattacks. So, but yeah, he's got the defense decrease on his first ability, and then his second ability and third ability are pretty, well, I wouldn't say they're hard-hitting. They're decent. They are decent damage-dealing abilities on AoE. The thing that makes them a little bit harder hitting is whenever he uses his skill 3, he turns it to Day and Heat, and one of his passives is he gives himself, an additional 5 or 10% attack if it's day and it's heat. So that's why he can hit a little bit harder than what his multipliers kind of say. But yeah, like he's basically just an AoE damage dealer. But he is strong here. The only other option you have is Arthur. Thankfully, they give you Arthur. But I think a lot of people sleep on Arthur just because, he's outshined by Kay, and rightfully so. But I think he's very strong here. He's got some cool passive abilities where he grants all of the Bull's favorite people. So, your Gawains and all that. Everyone in here gets a critical strike rate increase 3 for 1 turn. And this is on a 4-turn cooldown. But then he also buffs the duration. So if it's 1 turn, it will buff up to 2 turns, which is pretty nice. And then at the start of the battle, he gains critical strike damage increase 2 for 1 turn. Now, he has a very strong hitting ability on his third attack, and he has a stun. However, it's going to be weird to build Arthur with effect accuracy. So I don't know how much you can count on this. Also, 50% isn't great. I think you're mainly going to be using his skill 1 ability to give him increased attack, and then you go in and then you just nuke with this skill 3. Now, if you do the adventure mode, you do get, I think it's adventure mode. Man, it might not be. I can't remember now. It's either main story or adventure mode. You can get his Storm Relic, and his Storm Relic has this really, really great third ability that gives him 218% attack. But if he's attacking someone that is Frost, each attack does an additional 32%. So that multiplier goes up by, 96? That's huge. That is a huge hit. And it just so happens, that the boss on Bull's Favor 6 is Frost. So, yeah, that's where Arthur, I think, can certainly smack. So don't sleep on this. He also has a great ability on his second skill for that Storm Relic. Attack increase 1 and attack speed increase 2 for 2 turns on all of your allies. This is a very strong relic in this faction, so don't sleep on that. Cryodan is another one that, I've got question marks on because it's kind of like Urians. She has the ability to change the battle to night. Now, this does kind of conflict with Gawain. So if you have Gawain, just keep that in mind because he wants day and heat, and she turns it to day and night. Night and wind. However, whenever she is, or he, I think it's a she, whenever she's attacking at night, she triggers this Heartless Strike, which deals damage equal to 4% of the target's max HP. I don't know how well this scales. In a lot of games, this can scale pretty well. So I just don't know. There's 2 uses on it, and the cooldown is 4 turns. So just chipping away 4% could be a big deal. Or it could be useless. So question mark on her. So those are your damage dealers. If you don't have Gawain, it's basically Arthur. So good luck. However, there are some really good support heroes in this faction. Now, I do want to mention one little kind of cheesy combo here. And this was shown by Stu Gaming. He's another content creator. I'm sure you guys know of him if you're watching my stuff because he's 100 times bigger than I am. But he showcased this really cool interaction between Dejaret. So Dejaret has this really neat passive right here, where if he's inflicted with a damage over time effect, he gains effect accuracy increase 1 for the rest of the battle. Why is that important? Because on the second part of his passive, it says if you have 2 or more effect accuracy increase, and this means effect accuracy increase 1, not effect accuracy increase 2, 3, blah, blah, blah. It needs to be 1. He removes all the buffs from himself, but then he recharges all allies' attack gauge by, I have it at 50%, but you can actually skill this up to 60%. So what you do is you inflict Dejaret with his own DOT on his skill 2, okay? It gives him poison. He then gains effect accuracy increase 1. So there's one of them, right? To get the second one, you use this guy, Bulk. On his skill 2, he grants all allies effect accuracy increase 1. So then Dejaret will go in. He'll trigger his passive, which does not have a cooldown on it, mind you. This happens all the time. And then charge the attack gauge of all of your allies by 60%. So you have Dejaret in there. You use his skill 2 once, and then every turn you're just using the skill 2 of Bulk. Dejaret's passive is triggering, charging your allies' attack gauge by 60%, and you're basically single target mowing down people with Arthur. So that is one strategy. I don't know if it's viable. I certainly don't know if it's viable on the higher stages where attack speed and stuff like that is going to come into play, but I did want to at least mention it. If you have Lot is a great support hero. He has a lot of these really cool, like at the start of battle buffs, and then he has some really great buffs on his active ability here on his third one, which I don't want you to overlook this just because it's one turn, because remember, when Arthur attacks on his passive ability, he increases buff duration. So if you can speed tune this where Lot goes first, uses his skill 3, and then Arthur attacks, he will buff up all of these buffs from Lot for 2 turns. So, yeah, really great. You know, this Bitter Cold gives all of your heroes' abilities the chance to become, you know, like a control unit, which is really nice. And then the abnormal status immunity is always strong. He's one of the few heroes in the game that can completely negate passive abilities. I think he's the only one. So he's really cool. He's mostly used in the Forbidden Dungeon. However, I think he is a really strong support hero here if you're lucky enough to have him. And then the other one is Accolon. Now, Accolon, I think, is only a good support hero if you have Gawain. Because Gawain has the decreased defense on the first ability, Accolon pairs well with that on his passive as well. It says when attacking targets inflicted with defense decrease, it will also inflict damage taken increase 1. Also has recovery, disruption, sleep, so it could be a good support hero, but I think you really don't want to use Accolon unless you have Gawain. All right, and then the healers. So Clementine is a really good support hero, but I think she's pretty important as a healer in this dungeon as well. Her skill 1 has a heal, and then her skill 2 also has a heal with the ability to potentially remove a debuff. She also has a lot of attack gauge manipulation. This is why she's a really good support hero. She does have the potential to put herself asleep if she uses her attack 3, which sometimes you're going to have to use because reducing the attack gauge by 30% is really nice, and she has a really high multiplier. So she's a unique hero. You can use her as a little bit of damage with some control and heals. So it's something to consider with Clementine. However, if you need her just to be your healer here, you can just build her really high HP and just spam her second ability. But if you want to use her as a support hero, you can as well. You can use someone like Arthur, Lot, and Clementine as your supports, and then Luke is the other healer. His third ability has a very high multiplier for his heals as well. So he also has some attack gauge recharging on his first skill. So, guys, that's all I have. I hope you enjoyed. I hope this was helpful. If you have the ability to go in and build some of those teams, target those characters. Really try and push on these favor dungeons, because ascending your heroes to unlock, those additional equipments might just get you over the hump. So that's all I got for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you on the next one. See ya.